Welcome to Inside Games Daily, the only gaming news show brave enough to rattle off a bunch of specs that probably make no sense.
Yeah, but still, get new products, new PlayStation, a new box to buy to plug in and to play maybe one game for. Ooh, it's an exciting time.
YouTube channel Moore's Law is Dead have shared a full raft of tech specs for the unannounced but inevitable PlayStation 6. You know it's coming. In addition to a coming PlayStation handheld, which maybe is more exciting and interesting.
Yeah. A lot of people have been waiting for, a decade since the Vita for Sony to follow up, so it seems like we got something in the works. Now, before we rattle off all the tantalizing specs, we need to kill the vibe a little bit and offer a few words of caution.
Yeah, so for starters, this is an anonymous report from a single source. It seems credible, and we're not implying Moore's Law is Dead is erroneously reporting, but it's always an early red flag that you've only got the one source.
Yeah, you might be reporting all the information correctly, but the information itself might be flawed, and that's why you have to corroborate with multiple sources. And on that point, actually, the origin of this information is a little dated at this point. These specs come from a 2023 presentation from AMD to Sony, targeting a 2027 release for the PlayStation 6, meaning that not only could the information be dated by now, but also since AMD was trying to sell it, essentially, it might be a little optimistic on AMD's part, so the hardware targets may be a little higher than they end up being.
Makes sense. Now that we've sufficiently killed the vibe, let's talk about the specs.
Yes, numbers.
All right, in general, Moore's Law is Dead reports that the PlayStation 6, codename Orion, is targeting cost and power constraints, aiming to keep the power use lower than the PS5.
That's kind of a bummer, right? I don't know. You want the Ferrari of gaming consoles. It's just making all the lights in your house dim every time you pull the trigger. But I mean, that's likely to probably keep the sticker price low, which I think we'll appreciate in the end. And despite those conservative approaches, the machine will reportedly have a Zen 6 CPU with 8 cores and between 40 to 48 RDNA 5 compute units, clocked at 3 gigahertz to power the graphics.
That's a lot of gigahertz.
Piles of them.
The system's GDDR7 memory will use a 160 or 192-bit bus, hitting transfer speeds of 32 gigatransfers per second.
That's so many! Oh, I can't wait. Moore's Law reports that the console will have triple the rasterization performance of a base PlayStation 5, while improvements to ray tracing hardware will push that perceptive leap even higher. So it'll be able to do more stuff on top of just crunching more raw math.
Lawrence, remember when we used to talk about teraflops and flops and all those? Remember that?
Yeah, that was a fun time. Yeah, when we're leading up to this generation. Where'd the flops go?
Yeah, I don't know. How many flops?
How are we supposed to think about it without the flops?
How many flops do we have? Just in case your head isn't sufficiently scrambled by all of these specs, we've got more specs to rattle off, this time for PlayStation handheld codenamed Canis.
Yeah, this is really exciting. I think a lot of PlayStation diehards are going to really enjoy this. So the device will offer backwards compatibility with PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, which is pretty awesome.
Wow, that's huge. Lots of hardware goodies too. A micro SD card slot, M2 SSD slot, haptic vibration, dual mics, a touchscreen, and video out over USB-C.
That's really neat too, because that's something a lot of the handheld PCs have been doing. I'm sure the ROG Ally X will do it. So that's fun. The handheld will have a humble 4-core Zen 6C CPU with 12 to 20 RDNA 5 compute units clocked between 1.6 and 2 gigahertz.
RAM-wise, the machine will use LPDDR5X on a 128-bit bus with a speed of 7,500 megatransfers per second. So comparing that to the PlayStation 6, that had 32 gigatransfers per second.
Friendly comparison offered here is that the coming handheld will basically be about half of PlayStation 5 in terms of rendering performance. Though again, ray tracing improvements to the hardware itself will probably help it push visuals that look perceptively beyond being half a PS5.
Of course. Finally, the device is reported to begin manufacturing in mid-2027, with the device launching in fall 2027 or early 2028.
Damn, that's awesome. Look, how do you feel about all those specs, Bruce? How are those numbers hitting you?
Boy, oh boy, that's a lot of gigatransfers, whatever.
Sure
whatever.
is.
I guess that's what we're measuring in before it was flops. So now we're doing the megatransfers.
Well, that's specifically with memory. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. You're right. We didn't even really talk about in terms of. I guess gigahertz really isn't a good measurement anymore.
Yeah, not really.
Or cores. Sometimes cores is a good measurement, but like not really.
Yeah, it's really hard to put things on a yardstick like you used to. When it was just like one core and then a faster clock speed was better, it was pretty simple. But now with devices, it's really about the multitude of cores and compute units for the graphics that you can cram into a thing. But then you're fighting the cost of manufacture, you're fighting the power consumption, you're fighting a lot of things. So it's about finding a good balance. That's what PlayStation has honestly excelled at in terms of their hardware design. And that's what at least I see in the PS6. This seems like a very lean and efficient machine that is razor focused on, computing gaming graphics, which is what you kind of want out of a gaming console. So I just hope it's not big, man. I hope it's not as huge as the PS5. That's a silly thing to worry about at this point, but that thing's got giant lapels. It takes up so much space. You can't put things on, next to, on top of, around it. No, it's just got all these little arms and fringes that shove everything away. So I want a less ostentatious case. But apart from that, this looks like a pretty great console. I'm wondering about cost too. Like I kind of referenced, I think by 2027, what'll appear to be a pretty mid-range spec, but an efficient spec, will probably result in a console that doesn't run like $800. Hopefully this will keep it around the $500 mark.
Oh, Lawrence. Yeah, that's very optimistic. $500 in 2027? I think this,
yeah, we'll see.
I think this baby's going way up, and I think they're going to... I also think what weirdly it's may not even have any competition with an Xbox. Xbox may not be even doing, a proper console around this time. They may just be doing their handhelds and maybe like some random, Raspberry Pi is sticking to a TV or something. But like, I'll be surprised if Xbox releases another mainline console. They might. But either way, Xbox is going to have to undercut PlayStation, and PlayStation still owns the generation, so they can kind of do whatever they want here. If they price it at $700, everyone's going to balk and still buy it. So I think that probably lies more in the $700 range, especially because of inflation and tariffs. There's another huge question mark around where they're building this thing, where it's coming from. Just who knows? And a lot of the rumors floating around the Xbox and the Switch 2 and everything, and obviously the original Nintendo Switch just went up in price. Are that tariffs are increasing everything, even the consoles that have been out for years. So if Sony is thinking ahead and building it in a country that doesn't have tariffs, or who knows what our Mad King will say in a few weeks, then we'll be lucky to have a $500 console. Unless there's a serious deflation, I'm looking at $700 probably.
Yeah, my comments were mostly in a vacuum. I'm choosing to ignore the chaos of the world for this stuff because, yeah, who fucking knows, man? The most deranged wizard looking into the most tainted orb could not tell you what's going to happen 6 months from now. Which kind of makes all this a little silly, all this may shift or has already shifted. But I mean, in terms of Xbox though, they have announced they are working on a proper beefed up next gen console, but nobody quite knows what that is or to what degree. I think the rumors would have the next Xbox console actually being a little more powerful than this console, but that could not, like, for some reason, at this point I would expect almost Xbox to go ham. Like, being the cheaper option didn't help them at all, and it's kind of frustrating. I do kind of wish the Series S had lit more of a fire under PlayStation, so they kind of, like you had alluded to, maybe we're feeling a little more of that competition, and maybe you're going to price their next console a little more competitively. I don't know if that's the case, though. It'll be real interesting to see if the ROG Ally puts any kind of bite in the mobile space, because then at least PlayStation will feel they're sweating something, and at least they see the value in going with a handheld unit now. So I'm appreciative that they came back to the fold. Hopefully the business is good enough to go around, because just in general, the games business is getting a little weird.
What you're describing is the lack of competition. That's really, really bad in the free market. Sony really does not have any competition when it comes to a hardware console. And if they don't in 2027, then we're all going to get fleeced. So, yeah, I really do. I mean, for better or worse, I really do hope Xbox releases a proper console that is more powerful and is also cheaper. I really do. Like, that would be amazing. Because then they'll have some sort of competition. And also Microsoft, like it or not, can absorb the losses more than Sony can, because they're a huge corporation, larger than Sony. So that is a thing they can do. It's just so weird. I feel like right now they're kind of half-assing it. And they've been half-assing it for the last few years on that console, where they're just sort of like, fuck it, whatever. The Series X is $600 now, and then nobody buys it. There were estimates just recently that the Series X, I think even and the S combined sold 30 million units, and the PlayStation 5, sold 80 million or something? It was like more than doubled the Xbox sales. And that's, like we said, with the cheaper price and the cheaper console and all this other, like...
And Game Pass, like cheaper games.
Gosh.
It's not the same games.
Right.
But
right.
people just, don't value that enough to move market needles. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just I don't know, that's just a real bummer for us as consumers. We don't want that. We want them to compete. We want Microsoft to compete with Sony versus Sony, because Sony's going to nickel and dime us for as long as they can. Yeah,
if you're on PlayStation platforms, which we've advised against just in terms of general affordability. Luckily, PlayStation is, they're moving to PC for whatever. I guess we get all the games as service games day one on PC. Oh boy. But if you have a little patience, the good shit eventually comes to PC. So that's that's where I always recurringly advise people to invest into, because it is the platform with the most competition, and you see the benefits of that. So yeah, it's kind of interesting and connected with that. There was the recent headline about Sony branching off into being more of a network service provider than a platform manufacturer, which is ironic because that's what Xbox said about themselves like 10 years ago. And people have done nothing but mocked their business decisions since. So PlayStation a little later to that decision. I think Xbox wanted to leapfrog. They wanted to be first in line when the business went that way, whereas PlayStation rode it out as long as possible and got all the money out of it that they can, and now they can transition over that they've got everyone on their hardware platforms. So yeah, the next 10 years are going to be real interesting. And this is all neglecting the fact that no one seems to really care much about just incrementally more powerful hardware. At least it doesn't move consoles, doesn't sell games like it used to. Also getting exponentially more expensive to make games at that fidelity level. So if we're looking at 4K 120 hertz games, meanwhile Sony is smarting over spending this much money on Spider-Man 2, I think they're going to want to be a lot more efficient about their internal development, which means maybe different ways of utilizing that hardware. We don't get these massive living, breathing worlds with infinite detail anymore. I'm not sure what that looks like though. Maybe it's you get Fantavision 2 and it's just got particle effects that'll blow your mind.
I know what you're describing too is maybe a pivot into the handheld market. And like Xbox is already doing it, right? We already know that's happening probably in the next couple of months. And then if PlayStation's also making a handheld, they may be hoping that eventually that just turns into the handheld business. And then, like you said, the computing power kind of doesn't matter anymore. At that point, if they've opened up, PlayStation's opening up their market a little more, so they're actually selling other games like Xbox games, and obviously they're selling on PC. So maybe eventually they start branching out, making a handheld that will also play all of these different games that are not necessarily the Horizon Zero Dawns, but the little guys that are on Steam.
Yeah, and then it really is just platform preference. It almost reminds me of like the Apple ecosystem. I was thinking about this like USB-C video out with a PlayStation handheld, which sounds awesome, but just over the weekend, I, with my ROG Ally, played Battlefield 6 while playing a movie to the hotel TV. And that was all off my one, PC platform. I don't think a PlayStation handheld could do something like that, or maybe not yet, but maybe it could. And then that's like, those are the hairs you start to split about the hardware platform you're choosing. Is like, if you go with a handheld PC, you can do all this shit, but then also you gotta fuck around with drivers and all this crap. But if you get a handheld PlayStation, you may not get the entire feature set, but it's nice, it's packaged, it's clean, it works most of the time. So yeah, the UI is a lot schwanglier and has cool little accents. So some people, that's worth paying an extra $200, maybe even a year for PlayStation Plus or something like that. Yeah, it's gonna get weird, but not in a bad way. I feel like as long as all the games get spread out to all the platforms, then people can make their choice, and that's really all it comes down to, is just preference. And speaking of preferences, we'd like to shout out a couple of Inside Games viewers that have the most cultivated preferences of all, because they exercise their choice to support our show via Patreon, and we appreciate that so much. Sherwin Sanchez and Nick Calderon, thank you. We'll see you at the PlayStation 6 Portable Meetup in 2028. See you there.